So having this information now, I'm able to say, well, that makes sense. There's reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to forgive him. Forgiving myself is a different story. But that's a process and a journey in itself.
What do
And
you, what do
mm,
you struggle with forgiving yourself for?
being so angry. Being so angry with him for the entire situation, for thinking maybe I could have done better, I should have done better, for ultimately choosing me.
In
It
what
did get
regard?
to his life or mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think I had stopped taking the antidepressants at that point. But I think somewhere in all of that, I realized it was literally his life or mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I have to choose me. I can't continue to choose and put efforts into trying to breathe life into someone who is sucking mine,
Mm-hmm.
who is choosing not to choose themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and for being so angry with him for it and putting me through all of that,
Mm-hmm.
for stealing the life that we should have had, for stealing the marriage we should have had, the future, the children. So, yeah, that's a journey.
That's so, so real. It's so real, and it's so right for you to choose yourself, because we have to each make that decision for ourselves. And you're absolutely correct. You know, when it comes down to him or me, you have to say it's got to be me. And that other person also says it has to be me. So that together we're fighting for 100% ourselves, and together we can move forward. So I don't know what it's worth, but you made the right decision.
My mother in law, bless her heart, to this day, you know, like, it's just my mother in law. Like, that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I get married again, that's, she watched me grow up. So, she's another mother anyway.
Yeah.
So, she told me the day he died, and even through the process, and you did all you could. She tells me you did everything you could.
Mm-hmm.
And my therapists, my friends, and even myself, I have to remind myself, you did the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
If you if you knew better, you would have done better. I didn't know better, so I did what I knew. I learned what I could. Me and medicine have never been the best of friends. I avoided chemistry and biology for a reason. I learned more about medicine and prescriptions and interactions and drugs and more than I ever thought I would have in my life.
Mhm.
I started to learn different symptoms and signs of all sorts of medical issues far sooner than I guess I thought I would have. But also, I guess learning more and more learning different things about myself and recognizing that, I'm just as human as everybody else. I guess up until that point, it was more of a always the good girl type of thing mentality.
Mhm.
And recognizing that, I am, it could happen to me,
Mhm.
you know. I mean, I'd lost a couple of grandparents to that point, but I wasn't really that close to them.
Mhm.
Lost a few friends, but this was different because it affected every breath that I took. Still does, always will.
Mhm.
And I think that reality now becoming part of my identity. I'm definitely not who I was before.
Mhm.
I could never be. Am I proud of the person I am? I don't know. I mean, I survived, and I guess that's something to be proud of.
Mhm.
I'm living. I have friends and family who have surrounded me and remind me I'm not perfect, but I'm not a bad person. And that I'm one of the few people that even the times, how do I put it? Even when he wasn't the man I married, he was still in there
Mhm.
and that he loved me. And I know I will always love him, even if our life together wasn't the happily ever after we both wanted. We both thought we would finally find in each other.
When you look in the mirror today, who do you see?
I'm still figuring that out because, I cannot say that it was all dark. I mean, you can't live life in total darkness all the time.
Mhm.
Even when I thought it was all darkness, there was no pinprick of light. There were days where we did find joy,
Mhm.
those small moments where I was at work and I was able to laugh. Or even with him, I was able to laugh at, or, the times where he was feeling good and we were actually able to go out and spend time with each other.
Mhm.
And I had my Bubba back. And even since, You know, those last few months, you know, we had gotten off the plane from that neuropsych trip to Boston. And unfortunately, he went right back into the hospital. And that was the last time he was admitted. Because remember, the weight I was telling you about was, well, they found out that it was basically 90 pounds of water.
Oh my God.
And all of the heart issues that he had experiencing basically had come to a head. And the doctors told me that, you know, they're going to drain the water, but his heart is functioning between 5 and 15%.
Mm.
And at the time, I was so angry that I guess I knew what it meant, but I didn't know what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, it wasn't an if, it was a when. And I can admit there was a sense of relief
Mm-hmm.
because then I was able to finally push and say, look, I can't take care of him. This is beyond me. This is so far beyond me.
Yeah.
And was able to find space for him. But also at the time, wanting to ensure that he was around longer because I, you know, had no idea when the when was,
Mm-hmm.
that I was able to bring him home and have some sort of a normal life. And I'm forever grateful for this, but I was able to buy a house, buy a little condo, and was interviewing for jobs, real job stability, needed it because, you know, at that point now he was going on disability. So needed to have stability. I needed to create the stability again for
Mm-hmm.
us
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that he continued to get the medical coverage that he needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, bought a little house, bought a little condo, got the job, or was getting the job. And literally, and I'm gonna get back to your question, I promise. Um, so, you know, I was able to buy a little condo, found another part-time job. The day I signed the contract, well, this all leads up to it. I had found him a place in Summer Haven, who I'm forever grateful for. And he had called me to say he wasn't feeling well. So I took him to the hospital. He came out and said, you know, the doctor said that his liver wasn't doing too well.
Mm.
I had to work that night. So I took him back, updated the facilities and the nurse that, you know, he needed to add more medication to his regimen. Went to work. My mom picked him up the next day, and I had to work. I think I pulled it like a 12-hour shift that day.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been like a Friday or a Saturday or something. When I had taken him the day before, when I had taken him to the hospital, he insisted that I tell him that I love him. He knew I was angry, but I found it and I meant it. So after my 12-hour shift, I go home. Again, those 1 a.m. phone calls. It's the nurse at Summer Haven. Steph, get to the hospital right now. Ambulance is taking him there now. I got there. I don't know when he arrived. The doctor told me to call everybody. His mom, sisters, my parents. So I'm sitting there waiting for like an hour. And I'm like, is he okay? Like, what's going on? Can I see him? He's like, no, you should probably wait. I don't know, ignorance holding on to I don't know. But by the time, everybody got there and the doctor came in, told us that the nurses found at Summer Haven found Ali unresponsive. They started doing CPR. The ambulance came and continued CPR. But unfortunately, they were unable to revive him. But literally, that day, that Friday, I had just signed the papers for a new job. And I had gotten an interview for the job I have now. They called me, they said, we'd like to interview you next week for this job. I said, no problem. That night, the minute the doctor said that he was gone, every ounce of my anger left my body. And those who know can say I felt a sense of relief, but also deep wrecking pain.
Mhm.
Mom told me later that she knew. You get that call, and she works in medical medicine as well. She knew.
Yeah.
And I was just a zombie. So now when I look in the mirror and I have this, like, they were like, everybody was so great and wonderful. I was able to push back my interview. I was able to push back the start date at the job because, of course, there's no guarantee. But eventually, I got the job, which is great. And so now I look in the mirror and it's like, what next?
Mhm.
Married, check.
Mhm.
Home, check. Job, check. Now what?
Now what? My God.
Because everything happened so quickly, we never had a chance to have kids.
Mhm.
And now I'm at the point where I don't care. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Mhm.
But now I'm at the age where his life changed. There's a small part of me that isn't sure that I will well, live past him, get more years than he did.
Mm-hmm.
There's a small part of me. But I guess you can call that the irrational part of me.
Mm. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying there.
Because why? Why should I?
Yeah.
But the rational part of me that's not even a thought or a concern. But I guess the rational part of me is like, well, if it happened to him, it could happen to you. Perfect health isn't promised to anybody. A long, good life isn't promised to any of us.
Yeah.
And as dark as it may be, none of us are getting out of this alive.
That is true.
So right now, I enjoy my job. I enjoy what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I have family that loves me, friends that love me, an extended family that surrounds me. But I guess that sense of purpose that had driven me for so long, my entire life, is now like, because, you're driven to achieve those goals, those
Mm-hmm.
things that society tells you you're supposed to have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've done it. They still say, oh, well, you're a woman, you're not a real woman until you have kids. Yeah, I don't subscribe to that.
No.
I am auntie. I have 7 beautiful nieces and nephews, 2 beautiful great nieces.
You're a great aunt. Oh my
Great aunt.
God.
I am great auntie now.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. 30 something plus cousins who have kids on one side, another 20 something cousins who have kids on another side.
Mm.
The the need for children doesn't drive me.
Mm.
So that sense of purpose of what does drive me is, I guess, where I'm sitting right now. And I guess that's where my depression sits, because it's like, well, now what?
Right.
I don't take anything for it. I'm trying to relearn how to be who I am and learn the lessons that those 3.5 years taught me.
Mm-hmm.
Identifying who I want to be. And giving myself the grace to remember that those 3.5 years were a step at a time
Mm.
for everybody. Because it was COVID. But especially for someone in prime, their prime years,
Yeah.
going through an experience that most people, if they do experience it, really won't have to deal with until their 50s at the earliest.
50s, 60s. Yeah, even you sitting here as a great aunt put you on this time trajectory that I can understand you wondering, like, what?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to be doing here?
Yeah.
I I completely relate to the anger, to the sense of relief, along with intense pain. As you know, I had to care for my mom.
Yeah.
She had diabetes and went blind, and she also suffered from depression. This is undiagnosed depression, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
recognizing that she was depressed. And then trying to come to terms with, well, why am I blind after taking care of all these people? And even when you spoke about trying to encourage Ali's friends to call, my mom's friends dropped off. They would like to think that they were very much there, but they dropped off. It's
Yeah.
difficult for people to relate to situations that they've never been a part of.
Yeah.
They don't know how to be there. They want to be there. They want to think they're there, but they just don't know. They
Yeah.
just they just don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
so in watching my mom, and even with her having diabetes and having something that I know she didn't have to go through it like that. If
Hmm.
changed some things, things could have been better for her. And so knowing that, taking care of her and feeling angry about like, well, why didn't you? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like you could
Yeah.
have done
Yeah.
better. Why didn't you do this? Like this could have been better, but still loving her so much and having to go from being a daughter to um coming home from a long day's work, 7 months pregnant, and
Yeah.
having to um clean up after her because she couldn't see and was just like whatever, and so now there's a trail of things that I need to pick up because she's going to the bathroom,
Mhm.
just like
Yeah. Yeah. Those who feels it knows it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, like you said, just to be able to see him walking and talking, but still things don't connect. Like
Yeah.
I understand the dichotomy of this intense love that you feel, but also like this anger and resentment because things could have been different. Why weren't
Yeah.
things different? And
Yeah.
mourning that loss of the life that you thought you would have, you know? Even watching my mom take care of all these kids growing up, 'cause she was
Hmm.
a pediatric nurse. So it was always the baby
Okay.
in the house. It was
Yeah.
always like somebody that she was watching. But by the time my children came along,
She
she
couldn't do it for
decided
them.
she couldn't be there. And so just dealing with that, you know, and just and feeling the guilt of being angry, feeling the
Yeah.
guilt of feeling like, you know, of feeling the guilt of mourning her sickness.
Yeah.
I totally remember and feel these feelings. Um, I want to say though that in in you coming out of the darkness that you've been in, the impact that you're making on people, and especially with the group that you told us about in the beginning and tell us a bit more about, um, has been I don't know if you know what an impact who you are now and the things that you've experienced, how that shapes how you're able to touch other people.
Maybe not in its entirety because that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I had I have shared some experiences, not everything, but just the sharing that, when you're a caregiver, that the loneliness and some of the the darkness um onto my social media profiles.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a few people reach out, and I will never forget this one person who is a member of the group. And I didn't know her story, but she told me that me being so open about some of the things that I was struggling with gave her the courage to be open about her own journey
Mm-hmm.
as a caregiver to her child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, sharing my story was an outlet for me.
Mm-hmm.
So her telling me that me being open about my journey has given her the courage to be open about her own, and recognizing that everybody we come across is struggling with something,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what we may look like in public or how we carry it or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
gave her that chance to say that, this is my own story and it's not perfect. I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And to give an outlet for herself, which, and I've seen posts since, have given other people the courage, maybe not necessarily to share what's going on publicly, but maybe I think some people have said that, this other person's story has given them the courage to go and seek help
Mm-hmm.
for whatever it is they're going through. And to me, that's fantastic. That's incredible. I'm so happy to see that somebody has been able to find some sort of courage and inspiration through another person's story.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was never about, and those who knows it feels it. It's not about seeking sympathy,
Yeah.
you know? It's literally, where else do I go?
Where else do you, yeah, because you can't keep it, or
Yeah,
it will destroy you. It is
yeah.
poison. It is poison. Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I'm so glad that you found courage for yourself to be able to do what you needed to do for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The concept that maybe my story helped another person 6 degrees of separation later
Mm-hmm.
doesn't connect to me, if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
But if I see somebody else saying, oh, I saw a post from here
Mm-hmm.
that gave me the courage or inspired me to do XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
but if you do trace it back and it traces back to me, I'm like, how?
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You did what you had to do. I'm proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
But then for them to say, oh, well, it was because of me, I'm like, no, you found it. That's yours.
I think that'll come as you go through the process of forgiving yourself. I think not forgiving yourself blocked you from feeling. Because I know you said you're surrounded by your cousins and surrounded by extended family. But I know personally that it can be difficult to feel love. Like in the abstract, like you get it, like okay, you
Yeah,
love me.
yeah.
But to actually feel it and internalize it and connect it, like you said, it can be difficult. And I think as you forgive yourself for the journey that you've had to take, and whether or not it's like that or it's a process, that's some people it is like that. Some people it is a process. It is definitely your journey. But I think as you journey through it, you'll begin to actually feel it because it it does relate back to you. And it is impactful. And even talking with you now and just listening to, I mean, I had no idea of the intricacies of it. I just saw a post on social media because I mean, we know each other, but I wasn't
Yeah.
in your life. And
Yeah.
then between pandemic, I wouldn't have run into you in the street,
No.
things like that. So,
Yeah.
it's just bits and pieces that I see of the steps that went through. So just watching you sit here and be brave enough to even open yourself up to talk about it, even during your struggle, um, it is refreshing. I'm honored. I'm honored that you would open yourself like this um, to me and to this platform. And I just see so much strength and so much boldness in you. And I see so much greatness in you. And I think that this concentrated amount of circumstances and events that you've gone through, it's not because life is over soon. It's because there's so much more for you to do that you have to get this out of the way.
That's the first time I've heard it put that way.
Like, let's get this. Let's
Let's get this out.
let's get this out of the way. She's got things to do.
You know what? I'm gonna take that to heart. I am. I'm definitely gonna take that to heart. And I mean, thank you for reaching out. I mean, obviously, everything has its time and its place and its reason. And, you know, at the time when we first talked about this, it definitely wasn't the time or the place.
Mhm.
Audie's been going for just over 2 years now. There are other areas of grief now to realize that I would have had him, I would be without him longer than I would have had him.
Mm.
And people come into my life, like I said, if I get married again, or, if children come, or if they don't, it's coming to terms and rationalizing that there is more to life. I just have to figure out what that is.
Mhm.
There's right now, it's getting past those. I don't even want to say that because, getting past sounds like, a step or a marker that you have to check off in the process of life or grief.
Mhm.
And I mean, I remember being taught that, you have your, what is it, 6 stages of grief or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of want to strangle whoever came up with that because they clearly had never been through grief.
It's like 1,000 stages and the cyclical. And they have their in mind and they never know, you never know which one's gonna pop up at any time. It's just like
Like, are you serious right now? 7 stages of grief, and once you get past them, you're over it. Like, no,
no,
boo.
no, no.
You watched people go through grief in the 16th century or whenever you came up with it. You watched widows grieve their abusive husbands and they couldn't divorce and all the rest of that. So you came up with these stupid stages that don't exist. Talk to somebody who actually had to bury somebody they loved.
Yeah.
You know, talk to people who had to care for people who changed.
Mm.
Talk to people who had to deal with anticipatory grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's grief before you even and mourning before they even pass. Because
Yeah.
there's the loss of this person that you fell in love with. There's the life that you have now, and even though it was chaotic and hectic and what do you do? Now they're gone and you're like, okay, so what do I do with my day now?
Now what?
Now what? I remember the
Now
first
what?
Monday, so my mom went to dialysis Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I remember
Right.
the first Monday, I was like, what
Now what?
what am I supposed what am I supposed to do? I was one day I went to, I think I've told the story before, but I went to work. I forgot to put on shoes
Yeah.
because I was just like some ethereal plane, just like it
Yeah. Oh my God, yes. And it doesn't stop.
doesn't, it just,
They call it, well, for widows, they call it widow's fog, where you're literally in this area of there's just gray.
mhm,
And I'm sure for parental and other caregivers and other grievers, it's a similar thing. Where I remember one time, I'm like, wait, what's my name?
mm,
Like people were calling me and I was answering, but I'm like, wait, that's my name.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it was, a brief second, but you forget,
mhm,
you know, forgetting to put on shoes. I mean, like I said, now I'm 2 years out and my brain doesn't process the same. Or maybe they call it age, whatever, but I don't think it's the same thing where the things that you would normally do, how you would even take care of yourself is different. The
mhm,
things that you would have considered normal in taking care of yourself before, you can't do now, or you forget about it, or you process it differently now.
mhm.
Dealing with all of that,
Yeah,
dealing with your own brain chemistry changing.
yeah. Because as he changed, you had to change. You
Yeah,
have to become somebody different, somebody that can be in sync with this new individual. Now you gotta shift. You gotta become somebody you never intended to be.
no,
And then now you gotta shift back. Or even not even back, but shift to, but to what?
shift to whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's it's a difficult thing to describe. The whole widow's fog, the grief bubble, the grief journey.
Mhm.
I had been and still am a part of various Facebook groups and whatnot. It was, and again, during the middle of COVID, difficult to find any sort of support groups or other people that I could relate to. So I've managed to find a couple of different groups online um, for caregiving wives of stroke victims.
Mm.
People like to call like, oh, I'm a survivor, but for a lot, unfortunately, for many people, you become a victim
Mhm.
of the effects of the stroke.
Mhm.
So, finding other wives who internationally are going through similar things. Majority of them, yes, are older, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s even, but there are a handful in their 30s and younger.
Mhm.
And then since Bubba died, joining young widow support groups. And I can't remember what we were talking about originally. Oh no, I do remember the grief journey. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I'm just as bad at
Um,
it as you are, sorry.
it's honestly, it's just you start thinking about something, go on a tangent, and it's like, wait, what were we actually talking about?
Yeah.
But so basically, I say all that to say, being online, and I came across this hospice nurse actually,
Mhm.
who started posting about being a hospice nurse and what she's learned about death and grief and the families of persons who are going through or the stages of dying, essentially.
Mhm.
And she posted something, and I've seen two variations of it. I don't know if it's from the same person. It might be, where basically they say, when grief happens, your life is like this box, and your grief is like this bowl.
Mm.
And when you first experience grief in whatever format it may be, because we know there are different types of grief, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with death.
Mhm.
But when this grief experience first happens, the bowl of grief takes up the box of life. And it just feels like that's all there is to it. That's all there is to your life is this grief.
Mhm.
And I guess as a caregiver, I can see now that that's what I felt. And that was part of where my depression lay, because that's all I saw.
Mhm.
That this experience, what I was going through, what we were going through, and the grief of losing all of that was taking up all of my life.
Mhm.
But with time, life grows around your grief.
Yeah.
Your grief doesn't change
It doesn't. It doesn't get smaller. It doesn't.
at all,
No.
but life grows around it.
Yes, absolutely.
And another similar analogy, where still you have your box and you have your bowl, but you have a button. And
Mm.
the bowl is so big that it's constantly pressing on this grief button.
Mhm.
So that's it. That's all you know. That's all you feel. But again, with time, the box of life gets bigger. So now the ball is able to move. It moves off the button,
Mhm.
but it still comes back because it doesn't have much space to move. But as time goes on, as life goes on, the box gets bigger, the bowl has more space to move. So, you go through life and you're feeling, all things considered, fine. But all of a sudden, the ball will roll over that button of grief and hit that button, and you feel that intense grief like you did that very first day.
Yeah.
So having those two analogies and seeing those two analogies saved me in a way. It helped me understand grief and my grief, and helped me understand how to process my grief.
Yeah.
And give myself that grace to know that life will grow around my grief, and that sometimes that button of grief will be hit.
Yeah.
And it'll feel just as bad as day one.
Yeah. Yeah. But it gives you a sense of control too, as you
Yeah.
allow it to just let it do what it does.
Yeah.
Just let it go. There will be sometimes. So for my mom's funeral, I hated carnations. I hate carnations. I hate carnations.
Fair. Fair. Fair.
So for my mom's funeral, there were no carnations. There were orchids, there were lilies, there were no carnations. One day I was doing, since I've been out here, I've done a whole lot of odd jobs, including like delivery stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to deliver these flowers, and there were carnations in the bouquet.
Oh God.
I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my car because everything from that funeral flashed back to me. The whole flowers, everything flashed back to me.
Everything.
Or I
Mm-hmm.
could be watching a show. When my mom passed, they did the whole, how you see on TV, epi and da 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 and get and charge you 200, and because I was behind the curtain in the ICU and they were working on.
Okay.
So there would be times the show will come on and I'll hear that flooding back.
Oh God. Yeah. That'll do it.
And
That's your trauma response there.
it's so random.
Yeah.
So random. But just allowing myself to go through it,
Yeah.
shed my tear,
Yes.
and not get lost in it.
Yeah.
And that's where I've come to understand that grief has a mind of its own. It does what it wants to do. And you don't control it.
No.
You just
At
let
all.
it be. Let it be. And like you said, that bowl would now roll off the button and you can go on about your business.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's random.
this grief is it's so random. It's so random and unpredictable. And it can also be beautiful because it allows you to reflect on the good times that you had. It allows you to, while you may remember the trauma, you could also remember happy times because good memories will also flood to me. Random.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
you just let it do what it does. And then the ball will roll off the button.
Just roll off the button.
That's a beautiful analogy. I never heard that before.
Yeah. I'm glad I came across it when I did. I want to say I was maybe 3 months out. And that's something I hold on to and something I live by. And when people, one second. So, yes, so it was like maybe 3 months out, I came across that analogy. And I come across, and another thing I will say, something that helped me on my own grief journey was I found a conference for widows. And unfortunately, Bermuda love her to death, but there's not a lot of resources for young widows
Yeah.
who may not necessarily be religious.
Mm-hmm.
And reaching out and finding a space and a resource, and the organization is secular. So they look at and accept any form of widow, widower.
Mm-hmm.
And walking into a room, the first one was in Tampa. The first one I went to was in Tampa. Walking into a room of 300 people who've been through exactly the same thing, who've
Mm-hmm.
lost their person.
Mm-hmm.
I went by myself, shy, you know. This was March, so I was 4 months out at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It just, it's valuable to know that you're in a space and an environment of people who just get it.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain why you're walking down the hallway to your next workshop and you just randomly bust out crying. You don't have to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people there who will take you, if you know, to comfort you and to take you into a space where you can release that and you don't have to say a word.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell anybody, and going back to those um, analogies, if I come across people who are new in their grief and I don't know if I'm always doing the right thing, but I try to give them their analogy in the hopes that they're
Mm-hmm.
able to see it for what it is. And hopefully they're able to understand and slowly start to process their own grief.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like I said, being a part of this conference, being a part of these groups, hearing other people's stories, seeing other people in their journey, and whatever that looks like. Some people, you know, they may not necessarily, they weren't married, but had been with their partners for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Others were young, engaged, looking forward for the rest of their life. Random work accident, or the victim of gun violence,
Mm-hmm.
or a road traffic accident.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're all, and there have been a few that have been brave enough to share that they are widows due to suicide, and sharing their journey and finding even other persons in that community, you know? And this is not just the conference, because the conference, same thing, different people, different walks of life, backgrounds, how they became widows, how long they become widows, how many times they've become widows, because we've had multiple widowers, yes, yeah. Um, and finding your community, or finding and having a community like that, brought me an intense sense of, I don't want to say relief, but like fellowship,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that I'm not alone in this journey,
Mm-hmm.
that there are people out there, even if we don't talk about it necessarily as much in Bermuda. Because, like I said, the conference and the groups, they recognize all widows, whether you were legally married, not, gay, straight, trans, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That was your person and you lost them, you
Mm-hmm.
grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And to have those communities and to see their stories and to be able to, I don't know, it's it's a weird thing to say that when you share your grief with somebody else, or when somebody shares their grief with you and you're able to find some sort of solace in that, it's a weird thing
Yeah,
to experience.
I it sounds like it might be weird, like maybe because I've obviously I'm not a widow, but I've had my own source of grief. I took
Hmm.
because actually what I think what is weird is the weirdness of grieving and of all the different emotions that come with it.
Hmm.
It makes you feel a bit crazy. It makes you feel a bit off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you come in contact with someone who's also feeling like they're spinning and they're off, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not that.
Validation. That's what it is. It's
Yeah,
validation.
yeah,
I'm not crazy. I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy in what I'm going through
yeah.
because
This is
this is normal.
yeah, this is real. This is normal. This is what
Yeah.
it's okay. All right. I'm 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 going through this for real.
Yeah.
Not all in my head. I'm really
Yeah.
going through this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think when you always want to be the strong one, or you're always
Mhm.
the one in control or the one who is good,
Mhm.
it can be difficult to feel feelings other than that.